Good evening, good morning, good day, and welcome again to another webinar from Global E-commerce Experts. Very exciting this evening. I'm joined by Yoni Kozminski from Escala, and we've just been talking briefly before the webinar starts about process improvements, and this is a very cool bit of information. So going to be a must watch for any of our webinar watchers. So very excited to welcome Yoni. As you know, at GEE, we spend a lot of time creating and making information that helps our clients and potential customers to expand. It all is part of our 6-step guide, which is a well-trodden path that you'll all have seen if you've watched GEE webinars in the past, based on growing your business within the EU and the UK and expanding your online e-commerce operation. Today's webinar is slightly different because today's information is more complementary to our 6-step pathway, and is going to be speaking a little bit more about your existing business and whether you should be working in your business or on the business. And Yoni's going to be going into quite a lot of detail on what that means and the benefits of that. So really excited because this is relevant to everyone who gets in contact with us. So you'll know me by now. My name is Riki Hooker. I'm the general manager here at GEE. Been heavily involved within international trade expansion across the Europe and North America for 25 years. But I would very excitedly like to welcome Yoni Kozminski. Yoni, thanks so much for coming. I'm super excited to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, Ricky, firstly, thanks so much to you and the entire team at GEE for having me on. Just really want to be here, hopefully add some value and put a bit of context for people running through their e-commerce businesses as they look to grow them. So yeah, I mean, it's got a little bit of information about me. So I actually spent about a decade in creative advertising, digital marketing. I grew up in agency land and then transitioned into being an e-commerce store owner myself that was acquired by one of the aggregators. And as a result, I built 2 businesses, Escala, which is the consulting practice focused on process improvement, which we'll talk a little bit about that today, more so around how you can look at your business a little differently. The other is Multiply Me, which is our end-to-end executive search and HR function into the Philippines. But the goal is really, how do we help e-commerce sellers professionalize their operations? So, what I want to talk to you guys about today is hopefully some things that sound familiar and ways in which, and maybe in some cases don't, and ways in which you can start to move and remove yourself from some of the minutiae, things that really bog you down, so that you can focus on investing more time in working with the guys at GEE and expanding through Europe and beyond.
Well, I know there's a lot of excitement and apprehension that just goes around aggregator sales, that goes around the activity of what happens to these Amazon sellers after being aggregated, as it were. So listening here to your expertise will be very exciting. So let's get going.
Absolutely. So the first slide's actually a GIF. So the reality is, when you're running your Amazon business, things are happening day to day, and everything is not always as you would like it to be, right? You come into Seller Central, the flag's up, stranded inventory, your PPC's gone out, whatever's happening. Fortunately, if you guys are working with GE, they're probably handling, and you're not even aware of just how stressful running aspects of the Amazon operation look like. But for most people, it's part of it. It's a constant seesaw sliding battle trying to get ahead of it. So I think that the first really important thing to look at is on the next slide is you need to have a pretty good understanding and comprehension as to where you sit today. So before we can even talk about the fact of scaling your business and building process improvement, you really have to understand where you are in your business today. So very subtle difference, and it's not a term that I coined by any stretch of the imagination. I believe it came even from the E-Myth. It's working in your business versus on it. So what do I mean by working in your business? On the next slide, you'll see that when you're looking at aspects of inside of your business, your focus is typically very much on the short term. So you're looking at, well, what am I doing in my day-to-day today? I'm prioritizing things that are urgent. So like I mentioned before, the flag goes up, you've got to deal with that. You're effectively micromanaging your team if you have one at all. And that process is really ingrained in key personnel in the business. It's not sustainable and it's not scalable. If someone disappears, if something doesn't go to plan, then before you know it, you haven't done your inventory planning, whatever it is, because you're so focused on working inside of the business on the weeds. Conversely to that, working on your business, that's when your focus really shifts to that long-term strategy. What does 3 months look like from now? What does a year, what does 3 years look like from now? How am I focusing on dealing with prioritized, maximizing my output? And how am I effectively building systems in place and structures so that my team can run efficiently? And I'm simply the balances and checks, right? So your role effectively is to enable teams to operate efficiently and to build that level of a high degree of trust in the operation itself. So that becomes a very sustainable and scalable business. Now, to take it a little further, so on the next slide, you'll see that we have a few do's and don'ts, but for most people, when you're looking through it, you'll see that when you're working in your business, there's a whole lot of risk attached to it. So the risk is that you're reliant on those key players. It's also a perception of influence for personnel in your business. So if I'm working in the business, or let's even say I've got one team member that exists, what their perception is and what's happening with them without process, without insights around it, then I'm totally beholden to them in the business. And again, that perspective or that influence becomes quite dangerous. Whereas if I'm focused on driving standards, empowering leadership, and creating process accountability, and actually understanding what's happening in my business, removing any linchpins from the business, and that's how I start to approach scale. Now, if you're listening along or you're listening back to this, very common. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you what's a very common growth trajectory for a business. So you build a proof of concept, you've got that early concept, you build the framework, and then all of a sudden you get bogged down and you have an urgent task and then another urgent task. And before you know it, you're effectively, I want to say a slave to the business, which is actually the reality. You are a slave to your business, but you stop being able to see the forest and you're just stuck inside of the trees. Now, what we want to do is, once we hit that proof of concept, is that on the next slide, you'll see that we're ready to scale and we actually prepare for it, and then we build that scale. So again, to bring it down, and on the next slide, what you see is that it's very common for businesses to experience the first aspect of it. So, it's never too late, and all businesses at some point were started by humans. So if you've been working hard, investing a lot of time into your business, humans are the key drivers for business success in the early instances. But once you start to have that proof of concept and you hit that inflection or that tipping point, as it's written here, that's when you can really start to build those systems in the business. So, on the next slide, it really just shows that when you build those systems, you create fluid harmony that really enables scale and inflection. So I don't know if we're going to get any answers here, Riki, but on the next slide, you'll see that we have a question that we like to ask people. And that question is that if you were to stop abruptly, so this isn't a planned holiday, this is all of a sudden, for whatever reason, one of your employees or you in particular decided, I don't want to go back to work. How long will your business function normally? So, I don't know if I'm going to get answers here, if we're doing a poll, but you tell me, Riki.
Well, it'd be interesting if there's anyone watching who would like to add that into the Q&A, because I think it's a really poignant question to ask. And actually, as I mentioned to you earlier on, Yoni, when we were talking before we went live, we actually went through that process within GE's organization, even as expansion experts. And I think we ended up with feeling as if that was a good place, because this particular business has moved from that people to process phase already. So it would be interesting to see what if anyone else who's listening, what you think on that front. But I said let's take a look as the minutes go by, if anything comes through there, Yoni.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to give it all away to you then on the next slide. I'm going to tell you that if your answer is more than a week, then you're in a really healthy position. If you're looking at 2 weeks, then super strong, right? You've got systems in place. You are not a dependency in the business. If it's less than a week, then that's probably when you want to start thinking a little bit about sort of where you sit and how dependent. I mean, no one starts an e-commerce, an Amazon business, or a business for that matter in particular, hoping that they work 80, 90 hours a week and that becomes their entire existence. So what I want to talk to you about today is how to effectively have the most important people work on the most important things rather than the most urgent. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of preamble and an insight, because I can talk to you about what it is to scale a business, and I'm someone who went from having a team of 4 in January last year to 140 people on payroll today. So I've had to learn very quickly myself, and so it's all very fresh in my mind for obvious reasons. So on the next slide, we've built a semi-formulaic approach. And again, this is high level stuff. So I'm going to take you through conceptually how it works. I wasn't going to dive deep into how to build out your own SOPs, training videos, and documents today. It would just be way too jam-packed. But how we look at scale is that you first need to understand what's happening. So it's defining and documenting, designing and implementing, onboarding and removing, and then actually structuring your saleable. A saleable asset is something we define as a business where you aren't a dependency. So it doesn't scalable, saleable. The reality is you want to be in a position where you are not a dependency. So the next slide has what is our absolute favorite quote, and it's by Abraham Lincoln. So I'm also of Commonwealth descent here, so not as relevant to us, but great quote nonetheless. And it's, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. And that really, when you take a second to let that sink in, planning is absolutely everything. So, I can throw another one out at you. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And the reality is, this is absolutely everything that is key to removing yourself from working so deep with inside of your business. So how do you even go about that in the first place? So the first stage, as I stated before, is defining and documenting. So typically what we experience is when you go to a business owner and they might be doing $500,000, they might be doing $5 million. Typically once you start to go past that $5, $6, $7 million, people are already doing a lot of these things, hopefully. So they'll say that it's inside of my head, right? They'll say, I know exactly what's happening in my business. It's all up here. And so the first thing you need to do is take what you have in your mind and commit it to paper. So on the next slide is an example high-level process, and I can't remember which one I sent you. I sent you one that my design team had a field day with. So I apologize. Usually I'm very comfortable sharing all the inner workings of our business, but I sent you a predated deck. But this effectively is working instructions at a high level in our Multiply Me staffing businesses to each of the different stages that exist. So this is what we call inside of Escala. This is a level 1 process map where we know at a baseline each of the stages. So you've got here business development to onboarding to recruitment and then to account management effectively. So on the next slide, this was an example of when we moved from Zoho, which we're on right now, to Hubspot. We document out every single process so that before we actually dive into it, we put it in a sandbox and we understand, well, how does this work? So this is just the high level process. This is defining what am I working on at a high level and what's happening now. The next layer down is when you start to design and improve the process. So inside of these process flows is the next layer down, which is what we call our sub-processes. And on slide 24, you'll see that, again, apologies, the design team has sort of hidden a lot of the language that doesn't need to be hidden, but this is effectively the streams of each of your. So let's take an Amazon business, for example, or let's even take an Amazon business owner that might be working with GE. So for you guys, someone's going to be the key point of contact, dealing with the account manager or any of the key stakeholders in the business. So let's say you have a team member inside of the business. You're going to define in this what the actions are at a high level that they perform, what tools do they need to deliver on, and what are the steps that take, and then you create effectively a decision tree. If this, then that. If yes, then move on to here. And so we're starting as a baseline to commit what's happening in the business to a piece of paper that enables us to understand more. And the next slide shows a little bit more of what that looked like inside of the Zoho to HubSpot process. So again, where we work really hard as a business in general, I'm saying forget as a service provider, we work very hard to create scalable solutions inside of our business. So we need to understand exactly if someone isn't familiar with your inner workings, they have to be able to come in here and very easily and quickly learn on the job. And this is one of the surefire ways to do it. So once you've designed and improved, the next stage for us is leveraging technology. So you'll effectively look to use a lot of the brilliant tools that exist in market today, from project management tools all the way to Slack internal communication tools and beyond, and start to commit these to actually working environments. So the next slide is another one that we love. It's called Price's Law. So a small number of your team will contribute the majority of output. So if you had 25 salespeople on a team, then 5 of them would be responsible for 50% of the sales. So what that effectively illustrates is that if I can build out something that is systematic, that is process-driven, and that is quantifiable based on data-driven decisions and numbers, then I might not need to hire 25 people. I might be very easily able to understand who the performers are, or potentially create redundancies. That doesn't mean that I need such a large team. So once you've got all this stuff really well defined, you understand what's happening in the business, that's when you start to onboard and remove yourself. So this is when you start to move into what we like to call level 4 and level 5 working instructions and process maps, where you'll effectively start to create your SOPs, your standard operating procedures. So on the next slide, it's just really a screenshot of what I'm talking about here. And this is effectively, some of the tools that we love to use are things like Loom, which is a screen recorder, which enables you to create these videos to share information. So when we're building out and onboarding and training and automating our processes, we'll create working instructions, and we'll always have working instruction videos, no more than about 3 minutes. So we like to keep it really, really simple, so that, the logic is this: you don't want to have to go through this process. If you think about every time you bring someone new into your business, the amount of time, effort, and energy that the average business owner puts into one-to-one train this individual it's astronomical. They talk about the fact that it takes you 6 months to just start to generate ROI on that first hire. Now, if you can document out this process and not have to step in every time, and it's impossible to stop employee turnover. If you're a good operator, then you can obviously retain team members, but the idea is not to create these dependencies on linchpins. So onboarding and training automation is absolutely paramount to enable scale. And then you want to structure your saleable asset. So what do I mean by that? On slide 31, where we take things and where I would highly recommend people take things to, and again, I apologize that you can't see all the inner workings of our hierarchy in the business. This is an old document, but the point is, we define and we understand exactly who we're hiring and when we need to hire them based on the gearing ratio. So, let's talk about GE for a second. So you guys would be looking at the fact that when we bring on X number of new clients, that means that I'm going to need X number of new account managers and X number of supply chain and logistics specialists to support, and so on. So you're working through understanding preemptively who you're going to need at what time. And, it's absolutely paramount when you talk about the planning process. So from there, yeah. Sorry, did you want to say something, Riki?
Yeah, no, I think it's, that's totally ingrained within a small business owner, or even the medium-sized business as things growing. You go through this process of wanting to make sure that you are eking the most out of your systems and processes. And the crucial thing, which I think you're really covering well here, is anticipating something before it's broken. If the CEO or the owner of a business is running around, from the analogy of spinning plates on sticks, and he's looking across the room and one of the plates is starting to wobble because there's a process that maybe the growth is growing out of, so he's racing over and then fixing that one, and then you look to the side and another one's starting to go. It's this kind of the bigger picture of looking down and saying, well, okay, to be able to achieve the results that I need, how many people do I need, and getting ahead in terms of that. And I think it's a very classic mistake that is made, and it's not until you look at it from the outside in that it becomes so obvious when you say it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it would be uncommon if you hadn't experienced it.
Absolutely.
So, on that note, and the least sexy topic, but one of the most important, is that cash is absolutely king. So, do you know what, Riki? I'm going to send you after this. We built out a 2-year financial planning document on Excel on how to actually manage your Amazon business. So on the next slide, it's a blurred out version of that document, or an aspect of it. It's a really high level document, so you can't really make sense of it. But I'll actually just share with you. So getting on top of your cash flow. So what this is effectively a 2-year financial plan. So in this, and what we built into this, is we understand that we put in all the colors that you see that are slightly darker throughout, you could play with in this document. So you play with effectively the cost of the product in that top one, you play with your PPC spend, and then your projected A costs or your targeted A costs, and then you'll also play with your expected percentage of PPC versus organic media buying, and that'll build into your inventory planning and your landed cost calculator and your operating expenses and all these things that we have inside of it. But the idea is that, before we go into any business that we're going into, or before we even look at a new product that we want to bring to market, we're looking at what is that tipping point? How much cash do we need to bring it to market? I mean, gone are the days where you can say, right, I'm going to drop $3,000 or $5,000 on my first product run, and that's going to get me to the next level. It's just that's not the reality. So being very cognizant of what your finances are going to look like over the course of the next 24 months are absolutely key. And again, if you've taken anything away from everything that I've said today, it's invest in your upfront planning and do the hard yards beforehand. I'll say that what I'd like to say is Jedi level or next level is where we're getting towards. So we have an entire function inside of our business, outside of the consulting business, that's called our Kaizen team, which means constant improvement. And on the next slide, what we built is our OMTMs, one metric that matters, and the North Star metric. So I don't know if it's too small for you guys to see, but what this is an example of actual dashboards that we have inside of our business that tells us every aspect of what's happening. So number of won opportunities versus lost, opportunity days and the movement, cost of delivery, and everything ladders up into 2 metrics, growth and our efficiency. And that's what our North Star is at the moment. We're in a state of growth. We've been around for less than 2 years, and where our focus is on growth. So we want to simply make sure that we're effectively growing. And so as long as those 2 numbers sit within inside a healthy degree, then we're good. If they move outside of it, then we understand that one of these 16 boxes, or however many boxes down here, I think it's more, that light up, that's when we'll understand that's what we need to focus on. So movement is slow, or our financials are out of whack, or a certain aspect isn't going to plan, and then we'll hone in on that and we'll fix that. So we get to the root cause analysis of what's not working in our business a lot quicker than sort of trying to figure it out. So hopefully, guys, that's been valuable when it comes to looking at where you sit inside of your business today, and effectively how you can plan to remove yourself and build scale.
Wow, I have so many questions. I might end up hogging the Q&A. No, I think well, yeah, thanks. I can't see how this information isn't centrally valuable to any e-commerce organization. In fact, any business operation. Any business operation that's growing and scaling. It doesn't have to be an e-commerce, does it? What do you think is, what are the tips that you could give people in terms of the trigger? We were looking at that graph of that kind of tipping point, as you say. But before that comes, there needs to be a mindset change for the business owner to say, okay, it's time for me to get my head out and start looking, in rather than on. But that's actually the hardest point, isn't it? Because you're in the point when your head is, your eyes are the most are needing to be looking the sharpest, because you're getting busier and busier. What would you say would be the triggers for it becoming the time?
So I would say, first and foremost, think about how many hours you're investing into your business on a weekly basis. And the minute that is disproportionate to the hours that you actually would like to be spending in your business, I mean, that's already sort of waited too long. But I'll give you this, Riki. One of the things that I love to share with people, particularly when they're trying to make a decision of, well, who would be the first person that I would hire? A really great exercise that I like to recommend is, if you break down your week and how many hours and how many tasks and all the things that you do in your day-to-day, if you rate them from a 1 to 5, 5 being a task that must be uniquely you. Let's give the example of, well, I don't know, everyone's replaceable, right? But let's just say that for typically Amazon businesses, new product development. Typically, that's the thing that most Amazon sellers, that's where they are at their best, and they love doing it, and that's exciting. So that would be a 5. Whereas, let's say something like customer support, if you could build out some canned information or whatever that looks like, that would be a 1. It doesn't actually need to be. So build that roadmap of what does it look like for your day-to-day, and how many tasks can you start to actually offboard onto someone else would be probably the time where you start to consider it.
Yeah, okay. Because I think that it's that crucial kind of moment of epiphany from in a corporate sense of of understanding, okay, now's the time that I've transitioned from way too many 1s and just simply not enough 5s. Is there any particular piece of software or app that you would recommend for creating the process maps themselves?
Yeah, so we use one that's actually free as part of the G Suite. It's called I want to say diagram.net, but it's inside of Google, inside of like the G Suite. I would say in terms of project management tools, we are massive believers in ClickUp as a tool. And we actually help integrate that for companies. So if anyone's in the market for a good project management tool, it's right up there, and it's super affordable too.
Okay, I think that's, inevitably people will want to, go through this journey of beginning to document what those processes and systems are, to be able to evaluate, the amount of the work's required, and when when they start moving into the design and improve phase, beyond the high level stuff, because I think that you'd start from a high level perspective, especially with e-commerce, and then work your way down from there. So it's really useful to understand how that would be. Is there a kind of financial point from in terms of the sizes of business that you're helping to expand? Is there any kind of obvious kind of benchmark or waypoint of turnover?
Yeah, great question. So for us specifically, I would say the first thing is mindset. So all of our talent comes from the Philippines and is working out of the Philippines. Our consulting practice, for example, is built on largely ex-Ernst & Young consultants, but Philippines based. So it's not typically the price point that really holds people back. It's either the mindset, but we are working with, I would say, businesses that are typically doing north of 2 million in annual revenue. That's when people start to realize that it's becoming a little bit too much for me to handle myself. And, that sort of superhero syndrome where you believe you can handle every aspect of it and be the solopreneur, you start to realize aspects get away from me. And I mean, as we were talking about before, we're working with businesses doing 50, 60, 75 million in revenue. And in some cases, we're also working with a number of the acquirers of businesses, the aggregators too, helping build out their infrastructure.
Wow. I mean, I think we find with clients within e-commerce that the opportunity within the sector is so vast and attainable with that degree of hard work and dedication, that it pays those kind of rewards. So it's really interesting to see how you can take that and make it process based, and how you can kind of apply that to any organization. This has been absolutely fascinating. Yoni, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. We're dealing, GEE is working with clients every single day who we are partnering with and helping to expand geographically and in terms of multiple platforms. So this is a really interesting additional take on what's going on within, as well as the projects that are on. So thank you very much for that. A quick kind of recap of contact information. My details of contact information there. Yoni, have you got any easy contact details if people wanted to get in touch, or a website that people can look at?
Listen, if someone's bothered to listen to me go on this long, then yeah, they're welcome to find me at Yoni at Multiply Me or Yoni at weareescala.com, either one. But feel free to look at our websites as well. Yeah, and like I said, Riki, I'll send you through, because it's just a valuable tool that we built for ourselves internally a long time ago when I was an Amazon seller. And so we're just trying to give away a lot of this free stuff to help people get to that next level and scale. It's not about just working with us. It's about how do we help lift the entire e-commerce industry up.
So I have one final question before we finish, and that is, do you think that you need to have this degree of organization and planning within the business to be more attractive to aggregate buyers, or is this something that comes after?
Yeah, great question. To answer your question very directly, we now partner with several investment banks, brokers, and M&A specialists who actually seek us out to build out their SOPs and documentation to enable that information transfer, and then effectively it opens you up to be more attractive to more potential buyers. So if it's not just a piece of insight in someone's head, it enables businesses to understand what's happening, and it becomes more attractive. So yeah, we have a service offering specifically focused on that.
So there you go. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Yoni. I hope you got some insight there, and it was thought-provoking. Certainly was for me. A copy of the slides and to the information will be sent out after if you attended today. We'll also be posting this webinar onto our social channels, which you can see there. If you're not already connected to us, then please go ahead. You can see the information there. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to welcoming you on another webinar in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Yoni. Thank you.